Hi, welcome to Haven. This is a podcast that's a safe space for curiosity and conversation. I'm your host, Haven, and today I'm curious about reading the room. Reading the room. What is it to read the room? I think at a base level, it's going into a group setting and being able to pick up on people's thoughts and feelings and behavior and mannerisms and just sociologically being in tune there. But I think what's especially fascinating about this topic is I would argue most people think they can read a room. I think most people, if you'd be like, do you have this ability? They would say yes. But my question is, do they really? Are we really accurately reading the room? Are you really picking up on what's actually there? How do you even do that? What does it mean? And when I was thinking about this topic, I truly was just sitting there thinking, how do you actually read a room? Someone walked by and they smelled amazing. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's an amazing perfume. It reminds me of this or whatever. And it in an aggressive way, assaulted my senses. I had to stop and focus on it. And then I thought, this is kind of an adjacent topic to that of it involves the senses is if we had named this how to smell a room, it might be more obvious of oh, that smells like garlic, or that smells like a dog turd, or, something that's so obvious. But what I was like, okay, I'm going to go down this train of thought about smell. And it's not just the stimulus of a smell. We then immediately label it, just like I did of oh, garlic, maybe someone's cooking. Then we add the story to it of, oh, it smells like garlic, someone's probably cooking. We also then have feelings attached to it of oh, it feels so good when I had certain pasta with garlic and it makes me hungry. And then there's also stories or memories tied with those smells of oh, it reminds me of my grandma's garlic pasta that I just love and is such a comforting thing to me. And so I realized that a smell in and of itself is just a smell. We as humans are meaning-making machines. We throw so much on top of what that is, for good or for worse. Or for me, I can't smell fresh cut grass without thinking of Little League and playing baseball. And it's such a great memory to me of anytime there's a someone mowing a yard, it actually brings back great feelings to me. But also sometimes smells can be very, very triggering, especially with memory. You may smell alcohol on someone's breath and then be that feels so unsafe. Maybe a parent was an alcoholic and it just brings back a lot of rushing in. Then you feel it in your body just from the same stimulus of a smell. So going back to reading a room, I was thinking, okay, in order to smell a room, read a room, we have to be aware of what's picking up there, but also be self-aware of what are my own interpretations I'm adding here? What are my own stories or labels or memories that are being attached on here that maybe they're informative and great, but are they really representative and respective of the whole room? Just like a smell may envelop, you may go in and there's a very loud, intense person. And then your background could either be oh, I feel super safe with loud, intense people. Someone knows what's happening and they're in charge, and that's the story you attach. Or you may be I had someone who abused power and they were really manipulative and loud, intense people are overwhelming to me. And that's what you're presenting into it. It's the same scenario, but so much is added on top of it. So I wanted to explore overall of how do we read a room? How do we dissect our own interpretations of things to see things for actually what it is? Is that even possible? And so for this episode, I wanted to bring in my guest. Her name is Mebra. Welcome, Mebra.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So I know Mebra. We actually have a similar job title in different companies. Yeah. Which is kind of where we run on the entrepreneurial operating system. It's EOS. So the term for our role is integrator. And not many companies run on this particular framework. So if you see another integrator, you're like, oh my gosh, I get what seat you're filling right now. Like, I totally get what it is. And so we just connected from a networking dinner.
Yes. And then it all just went from there, where I feel like we got to know each other so quickly, so deeply through kind of the shared coaching group that we were in.
Yeah, we then parlayed it. So we were invited to a networking dinner of some other local companies in downtown LA. It was amazing. The dinner was like by Death & Co. And it was like delicious food paired with really cool drinks. We should have Ubered because each meal like had a different drink, and I'm a lightweight. So like next time I go, I will for sure like be prepared. But it was incredible. But then we joined an entrepreneurial coaching group that met once a month together, and we like bonded professionally and personally like pretty deep, pretty fast.
Yeah, instant connection. For me, I feel like it's so rare to find individuals who instantly get your work self. I think our work, we spend so much of our day there, and not those two things should obviously be integrated, but in your case, at least, it was like, oh my gosh, this person I connect with, I feel like I know as a like human being and a personality, but also we also get this side of each other, which felt really special.
Totally. And it's like the alignment of like not only terminology and understanding of day to day, but like, especially that coaching, I'd be like, what would you do? Like, what have you done? How does this happen? Or like, and I feel like it was just invaluable for us to have that shared understanding.
Yes. Couldn't agree more.
But talking about reading a room I actually wanted you on here is because you're very good at this. Like, I feel like you can pick up on understanding. And I do think you also like kind of hold back and observe, I feel like the observant quiet ones are the most dangerous in the room.
Oh gosh.
But I thought you'd be a great one because I feel like you naturally are just curious about people and also picking up on it. So I wanted to go down the rabbit hole of this topic.
No, totally. And I honestly, when I heard the topic, I was like, ooh, I like it. And then I thought about it for about 2 more minutes and I was like, I don't like it. Like, does it just end there? And maybe for people listening, they might think, what is the meaning in this topic? Why is it even important to talk about reading a room?
Yeah.
I loved what you said when you said we're meaning-making machines as human beings. And I couldn't agree more. When we walk into a space, we're instantly trying to read it. And we're like, oh, I have those frames. Where did you get that couch? I literally was doing that to you when I walked in. And so my field where I work is in architecture. And for many of the artistic fields, it's all about how do you create meaning for what a lot of people feel like might be a non-necessity. Obviously, there's shelter and things like that. But when we talk about when we put art on museum walls and things like that, and we go see it, I feel like there is meaning and impression that's left with beautiful works of art, just like the impressions that people make when they enter a room. So I think to return back to reading a room, anytime we come into interaction with people, we are absorbing or leaving those types of impressions. And I actually don't think they're impressions. I think that sounds too temporary. I do think it actually can be very lasting and impactful when we start to be intentional with it. So I'm excited about this topic. Really, really excited.
Me too. We have a couple different prompts we're going to go into, but first, so you alluded about architecture. Tell a little bit about your background. Like, who is Mebra? I know it's such a vague question to ask people, but I mean, like at a high level.
High level. Okay. I'll start with architecture. Since I brought it up, I very much I didn't know what I wanted to do at all, but I knew I wanted to help people. That's the most cliche answer ever. But I also knew I wanted to be involved in creative work. I was born into it, saturated, grew up in it. And so I didn't know what that would look like. But long story short, it landed me in architecture, and I've kind of fallen in love with that intersection. As a human being, I'm a twin. And when you're a twin, it's very humbling because it means that there's another person in existence who can read you so well.
Oh my gosh.
You cannot hide. They know your flaws. They know your entire family history. You still need to meet her.
I can't wait.
She's honestly such a fun person. But yeah, that's me. I'm a twin, born and raised LA.
Now a quick pause to hear from my sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Efficienade. Efficienade offers fractional virtual assistants whose sole purpose is to help people who are making a difference. Are you bogged down in your email and still managing your own calendar? Delegating those tasks to a high caliber career assistant can free you up to utilize your time towards the areas of your best and highest use, allowing you to focus on the areas you truly thrive in. Learn more at efficientaid.com. That's efficient, AIDE.com. Okay, back to the episode.
Okay, the topic, read a room. Why would you want to read a room? I was thinking, and there's an unhealthy and a healthy side to it. Yeah. I think an unhealthy side is, I feel like it's power to read a room. It's power to understand where the group is. It's power to be in tune. And it's also kind of like a control of like understanding where people are. I think the healthy side is diagnosis. You can diagnose what's happening there and then ideally elevate it. So it's not just reading, it's like, what do you do with it? But I think that's overall of like, why is this topic even interesting? Is I think it's like a wielded power. Like if you like are a hero, you're going to diagnose and try and make it a better space. If you're going to use it against it, then you can read people's weaknesses, or you can read where the gaps or the insufficiencies are. But what would be the point of that? What would the follow-up be?
Totally. And I would argue there's equal opportunity to this power. It's not that like you or I are born naturally amazing at reading a room.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe this is a skill that can be learned, which is why we're talking about it. In my case, when I think of like why it matters, often when I think of diagnosis, I think of what would be true if it didn't exist. What would be true, or what would be true if I lost it or if I failed at it. And so I can think of memories where I have failed to read a room well, and they honestly make me wince. I remember.
Please share one.
Okay. I remember this one time. There was like a friend date that I was set up on. So a gal moved to town, mutual friend wanted us to meet so she would know people. We meet at this restaurant, and I was waiting there for her. I got there early. And then she walks in, and I immediately just went to my default super extrovert, very kind of overwhelming, loud Mebra, which I don't know if you know exists.
No, I've never met her.
She does. And I can just remember she walked in and her body language was reserved. I instantly was like, she's quiet, she's shy. She kind of flinched back from me, even as she was walking. And it felt like slow motion montage. Like I'm trying to reel it back and stuff it myself back into the toothpaste jar, which is impossible. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, wrong approach instantly. But it was like, that was already out there.
Right.
And so I had to like dial it back. I was lowering my voice, softening my tone. It's like, okay, we need to be a lot more gentle and chill.
Totally. Like that energy clash there.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, I'm the one who set this tone.
I'm the problem.
Totally. And then trying to adjust it back where it can be.
It got off on the wrong foot. But it was a great day. But it's a little funny story, and I don't know why I still remember it. But yeah, for me, that's why it matters. It is about making a strong first impression, but also so much is built off of that.
Yeah. I think so much too is like the posture of what your intention is of going into a room, like if your intention is like to make that new friend feel comfortable, okay, you're going to adjust, from that of like, I want to make her feel comfortable. So I'm going to read the situation, assess and everything. There are other different intentions of like someone may want to go to a room. Maybe it is just to feel out and understand people. Like maybe you aren't even just trying to change the temperature. You're just trying to understand what is there and even like assess it. And so I was thinking of how would that happen? Like how do you go in and assess?
I mean, that's interesting. I think intention matters a lot. Some people in that bad story, for example, I resorted to my default, which was probably established in large groups with loud noises and things. I don't know, where I'm like, this is
from a bigger family.
Yeah, I came from a bigger family. I have to make a larger impression to be heard or something. And so I defaulted to what I thought worked pretty well most times.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to actually intentionally assessing, there's nothing better than the individual approach. Just like walk up to one person, introduce yourself, get a sense of who they are and how they know why you're there and things like that. And also I think for me, it's helped also to be to intentionally decide to be me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
To the right extent. Like I want to, it's so easy in social situations to try to be what the room is, but that's not the point of reading a room. I think the point of reading a room is actually more others oriented, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can augment and elevate the space or the environment or the gathering as opposed to serve your own purposes, look really good, be really popular. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Like, I feel like the fine edge of like doing it for good versus just for selfish intent is like exactly what you said there of like, is it just to like look awesome? Is it to be a chameleon? Is it to show up authentically and connect? I think maybe even authenticity is a little bit of what can kick it over to one side or the other.
Yeah. Or whereas it might be something like if I'm being inauthentic, someone might point at your inability to read a room and say, that's shady. That is manipulative because you're just trying to get everyone to like you. So
yeah, you could be read while you're trying to read a room and change it. That's the weird inverse there.
Yeah.
I think also one thing you were saying of like meeting that person and then kind of adjusting. Sometimes I feel like reading a room too is I'll go in and some certain people, it's actually kind of either uncomfortable for me to be around, like someone who's like someone who I feel like is highly anxious and trying to get a gauge or assessment or reading me. I feel like, whoa, like, let's just talk. Like, no, you don't have to overlook into everything I'm saying, but it's kind of like those mirror neurons of picking up on that energy. Like, I think there also is something of like, you can feel palpably when someone's doing that.
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
Hit me.
How much do you enjoy the feeling of being read by someone else?
Being read, oh man, I mean, I don't love it. I don't think I hate it because there's a part of me that wants to be known, and a part of me that wants to be seen.
Yeah,
I think I would be more concerned of like what they're picking up over what they would do with it. Like there's an instance of like I can see if I see my mom and I haven't seen her in a long time or whatever, she could look me in the eyes and ask how I'm doing. And I'm just like, well, you see my soul. So there's no way I can say anything else. I feel like it's when someone who truly sees me, that is like the best space and also the scariest space. So I feel read. Like, how do I feel read? It depends on who's reading me. And if I want them to see me, like if I don't want to be seen, then I feel really uncomfortable and I feel like a little violated or weird. If I want to be seen, then it's scary, but also like thrilling and fulfilling at the same time.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I think it does have so much to do with the person on the other end of it.
Yeah.
I imagine you being read by Aaron would be like, that's the safest space.
Totally.
But a stranger, icky, you feel exposed and vulnerable in a gross way.
Yeah, or like what is their intention of going into it too? Like I know people who actually are very great at reading rooms, but I think it's just because they're honing in on things. They're just really great critiquers. I don't think that's like that because they want to do things amazing. I think they want to be like, I noticed this and this and this, and these are the undertones people aren't picking up, and this is what it is. And that one feels yucky too.
Yep.
That one's when it's like, oh, if you're reading me, like, yeah, you maybe picked up on certain things or mannerisms or flashes or emotions.
But you don't have the full code book. You don't have Haven's.
Yeah, like you don't really know like the backing of it. You're just picking up on a couple of cues and then informing your own story.
Yeah.
But what about you? Because especially you have a twin.
Yeah. I feel like, so for most people, I have to be honest. Like if people were going to watch this and they know me, they know I hate being read. Like, I don't know why. I've been accused of being enigmatic, and I think that's probably true. And I think it has less to do with being read and the fear of being misunderstood. The minute someone reads you, if they're a trusted individual, great. But then if they take that information and use it against you or misunderstand it in a way that it doesn't align with what you're actually intending, I think we all have that fear of being misunderstood. And so maybe that goes down to it. But with my sister, in this case, it's actually a huge advantage. She knows how to read me so well. And I can't count how many social situations we've been in, and I just have to look at her and she gets it because there's a whole shared history. There was like someone said a word or they did this mannerism, or all I have to do is, I don't know, mouth the word dad to remind her that we need to talk to dad about this, you know?
Yeah.
So it feels like a shared language between the two of us. And so that is something that's actually really special and cool.
And you actually also did have a shared language that you told me about once. Can you tell us?
I did. So I think when I was thinking about this topic, about reading a room, I want to dive a little bit into like what it actually means. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of dynamics. There's body language. There's the words we use. There is literally the energy that a group of people bring in a specific situation. Think a networking dinner versus a gathering with your all-girl best friends watching a show together. I mean, like vibe completely different.
So different.
Yeah. So that's part of it. But I also think of reading makes me think of language. Mm-hmm. Language makes me think of fluency. And so it's important. Language goes two ways. It's not just my ability to read text on a piece of paper. It's also my ability to speak. Mm-hmm. And there's this funny story that came to mind with our shared language. Mm-hmm. So my sister and I, we thought it would be the coolest thing to have our own secret language that no one in our family could understand.
Yes. Very twin of you.
It was very twin of us. We had a whole spy phase.
There was I feel like especially millennial kids had a big spy era.
It was huge.
Huge. We were all like walkie-talkies.
I was code breaker.
Yes.
I mean, like, hire me, CIA. I did look up jobs at the CIA.
You'd be good at that.
Yeah, it was the millennial in me. Anyways, so we picked the easiest one, Pig Latin. Mm-hmm. And what was hilarious, we got very, very good. No one in our family could understand. It was pure gibberish to them. We could just do it whenever we wanted to.
Oh my gosh.
But we had one great weakness, which was I learned how to speak it really, really well. Mm-hmm. And she learned how to hear it really, really well. Mm-hmm. We never reversed roles. Mm. So all the communication was in one direction.
Oh my gosh.
I'm the eldest, if you can't tell.
Yeah, that's the very oldest of you.
It is. And so I do think that when it comes to reading a room, we are limited by our own abilities. Mm-hmm. And so I do think reading a room is two-way. It's not just being observational, quiet wallflower and picking up on everything and not telling anyone. It's also what you leave in a space. It's the impression that you make.
I think it's so true on all of that stuff of like, I think to read a room, it requires a little bit of self-awareness. Is I can only really pick up things on the outside that I can either identify or understand about myself. Mm-hmm. That's why I can see it out there, you know? And so I think it's also like, some of the best people that I think can read rooms are typically super self-aware. Mm. And I also think that they have self-control because it's like, I'm just going to pick up on things. I'm going to hear things, different data points. I'm going to gather it, but I'm also not going to make these interpretations or assume like I'm going to have control and not like guess. Like, I think that's the fault of like when I started the top of this episode saying, I think most people think they can read a room. I think they jump into thinking I can read it and it means this. I think reading a room is being like, you know, I'm picking up on this, or I noticed this, or this came together, and this is the vibe of what I'm thinking. I think reading a room actually requires a ton more question marks and curiosity and open-endedness than stamping things on there, because again, so much of it is our own interpretation. So much of it is our own responses that are coming out there. So you really only can hold it loosely. And even if you're, you know, majoritively accurate, I think it's also kind of holding it and being like, that was one glimpse of time. How are we ever really going to know?
Yeah. What would you say then is like the secret to reading a room?
The secret to reading a room. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of the people I know that are really good at reading rooms. I think it's curiosity and not assuming you already know. Mm-hmm. And then it's multifaceted. I think you look for the leader in the room of the tone setter who isn't always the most obvious. I think you look and see like who are other people looking to, because that's the person who's going to set the tone here. And if I can gauge their tone, I can kind of gauge the others. But then you do still kind of look at the other people on the outskirts as like, are they enjoying this? Was this something that like they were going along with? Like, what's maybe their mannerisms or their behaviors or their undertones. I think so much of it is what you're talking about with like the body language. Mm-hmm. I think it's body language. I think it's undertones. I think it's small side, like kind of comments or, you know, vibes that we're picking up on, where I think someone who's really great at that is just aware to like peel back and look for the tone setters and the themes. You're not going to be able to pick up on everything there, but like, what are the general themes that I felt coming from different people when they were like speaking or behaving or responding?
Yeah.
What would you say?
I think honestly, the first answer that comes to mind is humility. Like, and you said it right when you said like, it's knowing that you don't have all the information or all the answers. It's the ability to know that when you walk into a space, it's not necessarily about you. And I think there are really smart people out there who know how to read a room and actually influence a room, but they're doing it for their own gain. And so in our case, I think the power of it really is what you do with it.
Yeah.
And to me, it matters that when we walk into a room and we have the ability to maybe pick up on things that other people aren't noticing, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
I think we have a choice, and it's unfortunate if we choose to just be wallflowers maybe, and maybe it's not a safe space. I don't know. And we've all been in situations like that where we're like, or maybe you don't have the energy for it that day.
Yeah.
But I also think like, I like to imagine a world where we can, I don't know, find the folks who are quiet and loners and strike up a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Those are typically the ways that I love to use it.
Yeah.
Because those are like the interactions that tend to surprise me and be a lot of fun.
You know, as you were talking, something came up too, is like sometimes the people who I think are the like very highly attuned at reading a room, it's actually kind of a trauma response, is they had to be highly in tune with their caretakers for safety of being like, what is their pulse? What is the temperature today? Like, what's the weather? And then how can I like not make waves, or how can I please? And like, I think actually reading a room can be sometimes to someone's detriment. Like as much as it's a skill, sometimes you could be so aware of how everyone else is there that it's not like, well, what do I want? What do I think? What do I say here? It's all, what's the response of people? How do I like, you know, be copacetic here? How can I like not make waves and keep it there? Like sometimes you can pick up way too much on nuances and over modify your behavior.
Yes. Yes. And I think if it's like, there's a gift in interaction. I feel like human relationship is one of the gifts of this life. And so to read a room to such extent that it makes you shrink into yourself and minimizes you've maybe through past history have not wanted to make waves in a space. You don't like to be noticed. That has generally gone poorly for you. And so I've seen, and I've have good friends who tend to shrink into themselves. And I think I have too in certain situations. And I think that's unfortunate because a lot of people are missing out on the gift of that person and who they are. Yeah.
And that each person there is like, it all adds to the color palette.
Yes.
Like it's all needed.
Oh, massively. I love, C.S. Lewis talks about in a friendship, how special it is when you have a friend group of, let's just say, 4 people. That friend group has a dynamic that is unique only to those 4 people. Remove one of those friends, whether by tragic circumstances or distance, and there's a loss that's true and real because that person brought out something out of everyone that only they could do. And so I believe that's true. And if you amplify it in any social scale,
that's so accurate.
But it's a beautiful truth of friendship that I just lock into my head.
I love that.
Yeah.
How do you feel like this plays out in leadership? So like you have employees that you manage. Like how do you go? There's always something happening with someone.
Yeah.
So like, what does that look like with you on the work front?
I feel like it's like a survival kit 101, knowing how to not read people, but really listen like you and not make assumptions about what's going on. The thing that I've had to learn too, and actually I realized I was poor at, was I've been able to team up with some amazing people, and these amazing people are also very good at reading others. They pick up on things. And so I love that they gave me this feedback. I remember one of my teammates shared that when she would walk up to my desk, there would be times when my body language would communicate, I don't want to talk to you. even though I was saying with my words and like, yeah, what's your question? Or, hey, what's up? How can I help? It was like two mixed messages. And that was also probably, you know, who knows? Maybe I felt that way, or maybe I was just trying to get my brain off of whatever it was on at my computer screen. And there's that transition period where it's just like, you're so disoriented. And I'm so glad she told me that. It was a piece of golden feedback very early on in my career, which I think is really, I'm trying to get better at, but I'm not perfect. But it was huge. That little moment of what am I leaking or not regulating that I don't intend to do or to communicate.
And I think it's great she said that to you instead of like making up some unintentional story of like, oh, Mebra's mad at me, or man, she's upset that like she gave me that project and I'm not doing well, or like all of these things that she could have tacked on to why or why not you may have been behaving that way. But in just telling you and giving you the opportunity, like it also cleared up a lot of, I feel like there could be like some relational issues when we fill in the gaps without the story.
Massively. For in my case, like I think what I learned is I always think about what I say typically. So whatever I say, that's what I want you to hear the loudest. And in her case, she picked up on body language as number one. That was just what she was best at reading. And so that was a situation where I had to realize and go, oh, let's recalibrate. I need to pay way more attention to my body language because that is not what I intended to communicate. Like, of course you can walk up to my desk. and I also need you to also like trust when I say, yes, what's up? Let's talk. Let's connect. How can I unblock you?
Yeah.
So
I
don't know if that's answers your leadership question, but it's been
I think it goes into the reading of the sense of like, it's not just words, it's body language, it's all the other things. It reminds me of a story too of, I have a friend who's pregnant. She's talking about how like unwanted people are touching her belly. Like she's like, I don't understand why they're trying to touch my belly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, and I was like, I've been pregnant twice. No one has ever tried to touch my belly, like never. And I was like, I don't think I give the vibes that I'm like, yeah, please touch me. Like, I was like, what is that? Like no one ever wants. And I was ready. Do you know what I was going to do when someone's going to touch my belly?
What?
I was prepared because I was like,
are you going to do like a taekwondo move?
No,
or
I'm not going to hurt you. I won't hurt you.
Like, do I try to reach? Like,
no,
what?
but I'm not going to tell you what it is until I do it. So basically imagine you're a stranger, and listeners, if you're listening, I'll explain this afterwards. If you're not watching, explain, like you're a stranger, be like, oh my gosh. And then reach out and like touch my belly.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, come close enough where it's like,
yeah,
I just would touch you back and look at you. And then I would just like sit silent.
And we're just going to have our hands on each other's bellies.
Yeah. And I'd be like, isn't that weird? Like, stop touching mine.
I'm so uncomfortable.
Yeah. So basically she reached to touch my belly and I just reached back at her and I stared, but I was ready. And I realized though, I was like, there's something energetically where I think people could tell, like, I'm not the pregnant lady for you to come unwarranted. I think I did have some people ask, and I was like, if I was close with them, I was totally fine. If I didn't know them, I was like, probably not. I'm okay. Like, thank you.
Oh man.
But like, I think that is of like the body language, like people can pick up on stuff.
So, and on the topic of leadership though, this is actually like something that a lot of people have researched. I think, and I could be misquoting this, Daniel Goleman, he did a lot of research on emotional intelligence and how it's a key thing in leadership. And one of his 5, he breaks it down into 5 pieces. One of them is self-regulation. And I do think about that as like, what are you in control of or not in control of? That's being communicated through body language, through your emotions, through your physical responses to things. There's some days when you're having a bad day, things leak out and you're just like frustrated and your team picks up on that. But the more we can be conscious and intentional with how we are emotionally self-regulating in a workday, it has a huge impact on your teams.
It totally does. And I think even in a digital sense, like this comes up, like obviously like Zoom is so popular on there. I know your company's in-person, mine's like fully remote for the most part. We'll get together like every quarter for like some strategic planning, but outside that it's remote. But I was like thinking about this topic and I was like, no, you still absolutely can read people. I don't think if you have like a Zoom of like 75 people, like I do not think you can read that.
I think you can.
75?
I have a story about that.
Okay. I want to hear that next. And then I want to say this one first, but I'm very intrigued. So I had some direct reports come up. We do like a daily huddle, and then everyone came up on the screen, and just immediately I was like, oh, like thinking low energy, like it's a different kind of day. But I was like, okay, like we'll see how it goes. And everyone was touching in, and then like their checkups, like a lot of people had some rough circumstances, either personally or professionally. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what is that? Like, is it biological, like facial cues you can tell? Is it like the tone of voice? But there is some power to it. I think especially though, it's caution of not adding a story in the gap, but allowing the gap and saying, I don't know. Like, it's not the story of like, oh, they must be upset that I gave them all this assignment that took them a long time, or like this was an issue that they were trying to work through. None of that. Because so much too is like our own insecurity and fear coming up in those scenarios of like why someone may not be behaving in a certain way. But it's opening and being like, feels kind of low energy. Let's keep seeing it and seeing why, and then pulling some more information. And then again, like it doesn't have to label it good or bad, but I do think that before you jump to a conclusion and make a story, it's important to like see all the facts or like see what presents. But I want to hear, how do you read a Zoom of 75 people?
I don't think okay, I need to caveat that. It came to mind when we were talking. It was an instance where I viscerally read the room and like it felt like the room was reading each other. So in 2020, I got into grad school and because of COVID, it was all online on Zoom for the first year. So it was and it's a larger school. So it was a program. My core alone, my schedule had like 75 people actually who would meet. And so orientation, I remember logging on, entering this Zoom, and like, it was weird. I immediately felt the presence of these 75 people where I was like, and maybe it's because they're not my normal like social world, but it was it was an MBA program. So you have high assertive, very decisive, extroverted, very smart people all gathered on this Zoom. And it was like, maybe the critical mass was why it was so powerful, was like, I was the quietest in the room, like you're like, oh, so this is what it's like to be surrounded by like so many people who have a lot of similarities with me, but are X more in each category, which has always felt like, I don't know, unique to me or something.
That is so, it makes sense too of like, I think there is that kind of critical mass kind of moment where it's like a lot of energies feeding off of each other. A lot of people are similar, especially when it's intense. You know?
Yes. And I think everyone was trying to like leave a strong impression. So there was no, like, I don't know, there was no hiding. People wanted to talk. People were ready to debate. And it was a really cool, it's a very special culture. That I realize is a little bit unique. But for someone who I'm typically like in social situations, I'm really chill and like laid back, but there are those sides of me and us that often work engages. And it was being in a room full of people who are exponentially more in those categories.
And I love that too, because it's like, even hearing you describe it, it's like, okay, they were engaged, they were assertive, they were ready to make their presence known. They were very smart in this MBA program. They were eager to learn. They were like, you can even hear this and like feeling the high energy, like that is palpable.
Yes. It instantly set the tone for the entire program, for the way that we would interact. Yeah. So it was really special. One of the questions that kind of came to mind though, as I was reflecting on or hearing you share a little bit about the ways that we read the room and how we need to like leave space for interpretation. One of the thoughts that came to mind is our brains are often wired only to notice what's different. And so sometimes I think that helps us in new situations or with picking up on folks who we're close to when we notice something different about them. But how do you read a room when it's full of your closest people who you just assume you know what they think and how they're going to act?
I think those can be often like the most dangerous.
Yeah.
Because we think we know and we operate out of thinking we know. And maybe we do, maybe we don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of like our family settings. Like, my immediate family, it's why we live in Los Angeles, is they're all like within like 30, 45 minutes. So it's like always someone's birthday. Like, it's
awesome.
always a holiday. It's always a random game night. Tomorrow night is my grandmother's 80th birthday, and she has a whole theme. We're all coming up. She wanted us to have shirts written on it of like what I stand for, and for us to tell her what we stand for. Like,
oh my God,
my family's into theme parties. My sister had a housewarming, and it's all theme parties all the time.
Wasn't there a Taylor Swift one too?
Was there? Did we do a Taylor Swift one?
I don't know. Eras.
Oh, my mom. Yes, we did.
You did.
My
Okay.
mom's birthday. I was like, no, it wasn't Taylor. It was my mom. We did eras of her life, and we all dressed up of like her as a child, her in her teens, her older, and we got wigs and outfits. Yeah, it was her big 60th. So we went all out for that one. So always a theme party, but I think of going into family parties. I can totally read if my brother's tired from work and he does not want to talk, because he'll just do this face. It's just like a closed mouth, like pleasant smile, very tired. Just, I'm here. Like, I can tell, that like sometimes I think, especially my sister, we can read each other similar to you and your sister, where then it can also be like well, what are you picking up? What are you picking up? Like, what, like, are we going to side text about this? Or, like just kind of like almost like too hyper, like let's pull it back, And then, my dad's just there for a good time.
I love that.
He's there to hang. He's there to be with the grandchildren. And then my mom's the party setter. She's the one who's setting the tone of like what we're doing. And her husband, Pete, always is making delicious drinks. And so, but all that to say is like a family setting, I think I could pick up on like big stuff, but like the day-to-day stuff, I don't know, because like, again, like, them, and also I think they know that you know them. And so they don't want you to know about something. It's easy to just not bring it up.
I think that's the danger for me, where I might be guilty of kind of turning off that part of my brain, where it's on in new situations or social situations. But I might not be as intentional about paying attention to what's going on and asking, like not even assuming, just asking.
I think that's the biggest one, is like we may be so intentional with our friends or our coworkers or whatever, but like especially family, of being like, hey, you had that big project. How did it go? Or like that part's so hard for me, because you think, oh, we know each other. We see each other at last month's party, but it's a really good response to me too, of like, reading the room isn't just like these big new group settings that we're trying to figure out. Like, it's your family settings. It's like the most immediate circles. But one interesting question I wanted to ask you, of like, what do you aspire, like what impression do you aspire to leave a room?
Ooh.
And it can be family or work, and maybe it's different. Maybe it's the same.
Ooh, okay. That's a good question. So like, honestly, I had two answers came to mind. One is like a little bit more surfacey, but in a work setting, for example, I very much aspire to leave an impression of like calm in the storm. I think I heard a story once, I don't know where, it was of this lady who sounded like a boss in her field. She was a Broadway producer, and someone who worked with her described her as like unflappable. The woman was just so calm when everything was going wrong, right? When you're in the middle of production or something. And so I don't know why, but I kind of pinned on that and honed in and was like, I want to be like that. And it also suits my personality a little bit. Like that's just in general, the vibe that I like. But from a more personal standpoint, I do aspire to, because of my faith, I believe in leaving a fragrance of Christ, leaving something beautiful when you leave a room. And I don't know if it necessarily comes from me. I do think it's more about the way that you interact and hopefully seek to serve and bring out the best of others when you're in a room with them. But
I think it's even kind of wild you say fragrance, because that's what we initially, I didn't know you were going to say that, of talking about like smelling a room, of like it envelops the senses.
yes.
Like a fragrance cannot be denied unless you have breathing issues.
And it's missed if it's good. You think about it. Those are the things you actually remember about a space.
Totally. Yeah. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, how would you want to be remembered?
That's interesting. That's really, really interesting. I asked a question. I was not prepared to answer it. Let's see. I think in most settings of life, I think it's like just centered, and like, I don't necessarily, it's like, oh, like leader knows what's happening, but someone who's like, Yeah, I feel pretty grounded and pretty centered, and like what's going to happen out there, I'm not going to let it affect me. Like the quote I think of like ships don't sink from how choppy the waters are outside. They sink when they let that water get inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think of it like that, of like, I'm going to keep sailing, and like the outside waters, I'm not going to give them permission to get into my boat. So I think it's like the centered, grounded, like, yeah, I feel like leader. That's what kind of comes to mind. But then I think in the family setting of like my immediate family, brothers, sisters, or my kids, the thing that I would want to leave with them is like that they know, like, I really, really, really want to be here with you. Like,
I love that.
I choose to be here with you. I love you for who you are. I will make time for you. I will be present with you. You are the top priority to me in this moment. And I think that's how I would want my children, my husband, my family, like a select few. I don't know if I want everyone. Like, and I'm saying don't want everyone to feel that way. I don't have the capacity to do that for everyone.
Sure.
But for the people in my life that I've chosen to, that would be the impression I would hope is like, Haven always, when she was with me, it wasn't checking off a box. It was because she chose to be there. She cared about me. She remembered things, and I felt seen.
That's beautiful.
I think it's knowing that the rooms are different. Like the tones you're going to read are different, and the impressions you want to leave are different. I think it goes back to intentionality. So I think of like the themes of what we've been saying is like, I think humility of like assessing, like self-awareness and self-control to read. And then I think also intentionality of like, okay, with that information, like, what are you going to do about it? Like, what is your target?
I hope that sounds exciting to people and not manipulative.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to do about it is probably one of the greatest gifts you can give when you walk into a room, because who we are as people is just so complex and cool. And for me, I think there's ways in which we can limit ourselves in those situations. And there's ways in which people might limit us the way that they're reading into a room.
Yeah.
And so I think that not doing that, I like having the intention of not trying to limit others in that sense. I don't know if that makes any.
It does. And even as you're speaking, like you said, like, you know, not being manipulative. And I was thinking, why does that have a bad connotation? Like to manipulate forms, to manipulate things, like manipulate with bad intention is different. Like I don't want to manipulate a human.
Sure. But a potter manipulating clay or a painter his paint.
Yeah. Someone manipulating like our energy or bringing their own thing. I feel like that, like to increase it for the better. Like I think that is a skill set. I do think it's similar like fire, you know, like in the right scenario, it's life-giving, it's helpful. In the wrong hands, it's arson.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's less of like, it's not an evil in and of itself or a good in and of itself. It's like who uses it and how they use it. That's ultimately determining its harm or help.
So if we were breaking it down of like takeaways of what does it look like to read a room? Like if someone were, I think it'd be a fun experiment after this too, is like for friends to go into group settings and then afterwards be like, what did you pick up on? What did you read? And seeing like, are you guys similar? Are there differences of what you thought? So like, how would you kind of give people handles of practicing this in their daily life?
Yeah, I think it starts with just the intention too. If it's, I do believe it's a skill that you can learn. And so setting that intention of, all right, I'm going to be listening for what I can absorb and also trying to also leave something of meaning with what I bring. So I would say set that intention first. And then when you walk into that space, turn on those senses and suspend your judgment. I think that's a really big one. Don't just assume because it's your familiar group of friends that they're your familiar group of friends. Who knows what could have changed in their life? Who knows what they might be bringing from their day? So be open to that. And then maybe the last would be intentional, even if it's just one small way with what you leave. Maybe you set that intention as like, I want to talk to one new person today, or I'm going to find the person who's quietest and talk to them. There's a way I think you could almost gamify it and see what you leave with.
I love that. I think it's really practical of like seeing how to really explore that. And it also makes me think of tuning into yourself too, going to that setting of like, I think of when I'm driving and someone cuts me off, if I'm in a good mood, it's like, whatever, you do your thing, car, in front of you, I shall serve you. But if I'm in a bad mood, oh man, I'll get upset. I just want to slam on my brakes and I kind of look around and then there's bad drivers everywhere. Like it's the same scenario, but my internal world is causing a response to it. So I think going into like whatever room, I think you also got to self-check and be like, what mood am I in today? And how's that going to impact what I'm seeing?
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
However, how chaotic it was to arrive, you get to choose if you bring that with you or not.
Well, thank you for coming, Mebra.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
I know. I love it. You made a hefty drive to get here.
Oh, my pleasure. That's just part of what it means to live in LA.
I love. Next time we hang out, maybe this podcast will be out and you can listen to the whole thing on the drive.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
But thank you for having me. This was so special. And it felt like a conversation.
Yeah.
So it was easy.
Yay. I loved it. Okay. Well, if you would review and rate this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, that helps really get this some visibility. You can follow, like, share, comment, everything on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts at Haven the Podcast. I also have a newsletter. You can sign up for havenpod.com. Those come out each month. And then this one I sometimes mention, I sometimes don't. If you have long form questions or any topics that you want to have me explore or kind of go into, you can email hello@havenpod.com. If there's something that you just want to craft together and see, there's been some very, very interesting submissions come in. I have a little log of them. And so I'd love to kind of hear of like, what would you want to hear and what would your takeaways be? But other than that, thank you. I hope you have some fun reading some rooms with your friends. And if you have something completely different from one another, please email me. I'd like to hear the different responses. I think it's such an interesting exercise. But thank you, and I'll see you later.